Başlayayım mı? First of all, thank you very much for joining me in this important moment as we're having a kind of a comeback from after COVID period with a very lively meeting today where our corridors are full of people, journalists, ministers, accompanying people. I think we were missing that kind of a very active period, and I'm happy that we are back. So the reason I wanted to make a statement is, as the meeting is very lively and we had important messages, I decided actually to make a statement of the President. But then I changed it into an appeal for peace statement. So I'm going to read this statement to you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Today we held the first in-person high-level meeting of the 75th session of the General Assembly. It is only fitting that we gathered to discuss the question of Palestine, an issue that has been on the UN agenda for 75 years. Our meeting today is reflection of the gravity of the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory, particularly in Gaza and occupied East Jerusalem. So far, we have heard from over 50 speakers. There are many more member states to speak. Altogether, the list of speakers has 103 requests. So most probably, I will separate the meeting with the foreign ministers in attendance, and we will continue on Tuesday for those who will not have the chance to speak today. Listening to the views of the member states here today, I am, as President of the General Assembly, issuing this appeal for peace. I have seen that there is broad, near unanimous support for the way forward. First, the ceasefire. The bloodshed and violence must end before it's too late. The news just now of the overdue ceasefire in Gaza is reassuring. This was one of the key demands of member states that we heard from today's debate. This shows that when the General Assembly takes the lead and member states speak up together, we get results. Second, Israel, as an occupying power, must adhere to international human rights and humanitarian law. Third, we must address critical humanitarian needs of the Palestinians. This includes mobilizing support for UNRWA and rebuilding vital public infrastructure that has been destroyed, particularly in Gaza. Fourth, we must intensify diplomatic efforts in pursuit of intra-Palestinian reconciliation. Finally, intensified diplomatic efforts must forge a path to viable negotiations between the parties with the goal of ending the occupation and achieving a viable two-state solution with the State of Israel and the State of Palestine living side by side in peace, security, and mutual recognition with recognized borders on the basis of 1967 lines with Jerusalem as the capital of both sides. I cannot overemphasize what I said earlier. We have been at this unfortunate juncture too many times. This latest flare-up did not happen in a vacuum. This is not an isolated occurrence, and it cannot be diverged from the broader context of this decades-long issue, including the protracted military occupation of the Palestinian territories. The occupation, compounded by political impasse and lack of negotiations, is the main underlying source of instability, disillusionment, and the perpetuation of this conflict. The Security Council has yet to even speak with a unified voice about the tragedy unfolding before us. To say that this is disappointing is understatement. I convened today's meeting in a large part to compensate for the silence of the Security Council. The General Assembly assumed its responsibility under the Charter of the United Nations. We will be at this point again and again if we do not commit to taking concrete steps towards achieving a just and comprehensive peace for Israelis and Palestinians. With this in mind, as we reaffirm our collective commitment to multilateralism on this historic 75th session of the General Assembly, let us commit to do so with actions and not just words. I appeal to all member states to join me in committing to peace today and every day. This is my appeal to peace.
Thank you, Mr. President. Two questions, if I may. What do you think the next step should be after the ceasefire announcement? And today, during the General Assembly session, there were calls to set up an international protection mechanism for the Palestinian civilians. Is this something you would support, and is that something the UN can achieve? Thank you.
What I would support is, first of all, today's meeting was not organized to point to some country or to some place, but it was to point to peace. And I think this meeting has achieved that first step forward. This is important because after 4 meetings of the Security Council, we didn't even hear a sound on ceasefire, on what we are going to do next, how can we stop the killing of innocent people. And so in a way, when we started the process, these all started to come in front of us. The countries involved started speaking about a ceasefire. Countries involved now speaking on what step shall we take first. So I think the 3 organs of the United Nations, the General Assembly, Security Council, and the Secretary General, have their own responsibilities. And this is not a challenge between the 3 organs. It is a complementary thing. And if all the organs take their responsibility, then I think reaching a point for the sake of peace and security will be much more easier and important. We shouldn't leave everything to the Security Council. We shouldn't leave everything to the Secretary General. We shouldn't expect everything from the General Assembly. But this is a teamwork. And if something is not moving at one organ, then we have showed today that the General Assembly is able also to give a message and to solve things. So the next step, I think it is too early to talk about the future important steps. Let us first see that the ceasefire is implemented, because many times ceasefire declarations were announced, but it was not implemented. So we're going to closely follow up what the situation on the ground is. And then, as I have also appealed for peace, I think both sides has an obligation, and also the United Nations has an obligation to implement all the resolutions, all the decisions, all the court decisions which is in front of us. And that's why some people are asking, why didn't we have a resolution? And I would say, we have all the resolutions. I mean, nothing is missing there. For so many years, for so many decades, we had so many resolutions. Some of them are not implemented, some of them are perhaps forgotten. So I think, in my understanding, as a diplomat and a politician, I believe in political winds. The political wind sometimes, or many times, are more stronger than words written on papers, which are not implemented. I think today we got the wind behind us. The political wind was that. The messages were strong. And everybody spoke in a very civilized manner, expressing their views. The others listened, and we achieved something, the ceasefire. So next step, if this is not implemented, then we can always convene the General Assembly once again. If 2 countries, 2 groups apply to me, I have announced that I will have another General Assembly meeting sooner or later. And of course, that meeting might go for further decisions to put more pressure on the system.
Let's go with that, please.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have 2 questions. My first question, Israel has been a country above the law. It has violated the UN Charter, Security Council resolution, GA resolutions, 4 Geneva Convention, ICJ opinion, and many others, and the Human Rights Council, of course. So what the international community can do to bring Israel to an account, to pay for all these violations? And the second, according to Resolution 4649 of 1970 and Resolution 3236 of the GA, Palestinians and any other people under occupation have the right to resist occupation. Are the Palestinians entitled to resist occupation or not? Thank you.
As I said, we have many resolutions, many decisions, many of them not implemented. But we shouldn't lose the main part of the resolutions until now, which is achieving two independent states, sovereign, viable states, Israel and Palestine, living side by side in peace, security, and mutual recognition within recognized borders on the basis of the pre-1967 lines, with Jerusalem as the capital of both states. This is the constitution of the whole of the resolutions. So the rest is perhaps a way which is felt by the Palestinians to reach this goal. But I think more than demonstrations, fights, lives lost, I think politically these kind of meetings are the main pressure on both sides which could lead to a final solution. Civil societies, member countries, people on the streets. We saw people on the streets in New York, in Chicago, in Europe, in many countries. There were peaceful demonstrations, peaceful bringing the attention to this issue. So I think all of this is a combined effort to make the resolutions demands to come into force. I wouldn't, as the United Nations, suggest any action which is which is threatening lives and endangering children to be killed, women to be killed, innocent civilians to be killed. I'm completely against it, and I have continuously expressed my strong views that this is not going to be permitted, this is not right. So if these demonstrations are causing loss of lives, my heart will be broken. But if it is for an aim, it is up to the countries, it's up to the populations to decide what they do. But I mean, my preference is to use the political mechanisms, diplomatic mechanisms, and the mechanisms of the United Nations, or whatever the efficient mechanism is there to find a solution.
Let's go, Volkan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was wondering, do you think that today's in-person meeting could have an impact on whether we meet in person during the high-level week?
Yeah, I think we came through a very difficult period. You were with us. We observed how difficult it was. But I think we managed to keep the United Nations alive. The General Assembly was the only platform which met in person among the 67 UN official platforms. And I'm honored to lead that together with the member states and the Secretariat. It wasn't easy. When I remember when my election took place in June, I was watching from Istanbul, and the PRs were coming in with intervals, and they were like afraid people in the forest, afraid of being shot. And today, what we are seeing is as if it was February 2020, before the COVID. So these were not easy. But I think what I can say is, this is the minimum from now on. We can't go back anymore, unless there is a big pandemic which will surprise us. But this is the minimum. I will make sure that in the General Assembly meetings, I will force to have 1+1 seating. I will force to have the quarantine applied to the UN members as it is applied to the New Yorkers. And I will, of course, force everybody to work harder and with more people in this headquarters, which I couldn't feel myself happy as looking at a deserted headquarters, which I think is not correct. While people in the world, 200,000 UN workers, UN people are risking their lives in difficult posts in peace operations, education, health, whatever necessary. We didn't have the luxury to stay hidden at our homes, so that's why I came always to the office together with my team and tried to give the message. And I started the travelings. This Saturday I'm going to Bangladesh and Pakistan. I'll visit the Cox's Bazar as well to meet with the refugees there. I will give my messages to Myanmar from Cox's Bazar. And I just want to show that the UN flag is again traveling around the world. I was in 3 countries. I went there. I will go another 3 countries in June, another 3 countries in July. So these are symbolic. The UN flag was seen wherever I went, and they were applauding the flag in my car. And I was very much impressed about that. And people were expecting the UN flag to be there. And today we showed the UN flag again to the world, and I think the messages I'm receiving is really supportive and giving us a lot of, how should I say, happiness and proud that we are doing this. And together we are doing it. Thank you very much for the question.
Mr. President, can I ask you, Alan? Sorry, no, go ahead.
So, the commander is here.
Yes, sorry, my bad.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a little follow-up question. Today we've heard several calls for these so-called international protection forces to be deployed to the region. Do you find that such a mechanism should be mandated by the UN somehow? Thank you.
Well, every intention to reach to a peace and security level is okay. I don't know if this would be a solution or not. But first of all, this United Nations works according to the member states' requests and wishes. So in order to go to that kind of a step, we must first see that if there's a request from the member country. If we do it ourselves, it will not work. Again, I will say the political wind and the demand of the member countries must be behind us. So we will look at it, see if the two, Israel and Palestinians, is ready for that. Will it be useful? Will it help something, or will it make the situation deteriorate even further? I think we must look from that perspective to also. But this shouldn't lead us to complacency and say, okay, we made this General Assembly meeting, so our job is over. Thank you very much. See you next session. No. We will check it every day, every week, and also try if these measures are applicable or not.
We have time for 2 more questions. Dulcie and then Nabil.
Thanks very much.
Without Dolphin, I won't leave this.
Well, okay, I'll ask you an easy question. But are you saying that this meeting today directly had an effect on the announcement of a ceasefire?
Yes.
I mean, how do you know?
Absolutely, because we all followed together. When these attacks, the loss of lives started, it was something like 11 days ago. Nothing happened until last Friday when I first met with the people to convene this meeting. Starting Friday, these messages started to come. And Monday, there were important countries also started using the term of ceasefire. And today, after the meeting, we're happy to hear that ceasefire is going to be announced. So I have all the right to think that the General Assembly meeting today and the days in the preparatory period was the reason behind achieving a ceasefire.
So you wish the meeting could have taken place earlier, so the ceasefire would have...
Well, that is philosophy. I mean, this meeting took place today, and the ceasefire was announced today. So, I mean, if it was yesterday and yesterday, okay. If it is tomorrow, tomorrow, it's anyhow. Important thing is It happened the same day. And I claim that it's because of the General Assembly that it happened.
So strike by final two questions, Nabil and then AP. Go ahead, Nabil.
Thank you. So, Mr. President, we saw the added value for the meeting today, and I can say from my coverage, we see the political weight that the meeting added to the subject of the crisis. So what can the General Assembly do to accelerate the reopening of the UN, to bring diplomats back, to bring the UN staff back? How can you accelerate? And what do you think about also your contact with New York City, New York State, the host country? What's the impact of all of this on coming back to the UN?
Well, nobody can force anybody to do something. My responsibility is to keep the General Assembly alive and step by step make the meetings with more people, with more efficiency, more attractive meetings, and that will, of course, in a way, force the people to come here. It is because the General Assembly was opened. Many PRs are telling me that, thank you, PGA, you kept the General Assembly open so that our delegations were able to see our staff in the permanent delegation office. So it works like that. So if we increase the level of work here, if we increase the participation, then UN headquarters will need more interpreters, more security, more secretariat, more mitigation measure controls, more. So it happens in a chain reaction. That's why I said the minimum is today. From now on, we can't say, well, we can only have 1 from 4 member states or this and that. No. 1+1 will be implemented very soon. And I think the quarantine must be applied similar to what the New Yorkers are facing. And we're going to find a way with the vaccination proof. What I'm proposing, I will propose it very soon. We have to trust the permanent delegations. Every delegation has a card, like you do. By putting this card into the entry machine, you're actually making a statement now that you haven't had a COVID case, you don't have fever, you haven't met with somebody who had tested positive, etc., etc. We can easily add that question, I'm vaccinated. So you don't have to do anything. Just show your card, come in. We have to trust the delegation because until now, they have never overruled this trust. They have informed me on time if there was somebody in their delegations who had tested positively, so they quarantined themselves, and we came here without any incident in the General Assembly. So this will work again. And so there are practical measures but I know that as over 10 ministers came here, some flew 40 hours, some flew 20 hours. They took the burden and the difficult trips to come here. I'm sure next meetings will have also ministers coming here. And that will be wonderful because if ministers come, if foreign participation from outside of New York occurs, then we will have similar meetings to what we had before the corona incident. So that's where we are. And concerning the local authorities, you know that my appeal to pay a courtesy call has not been responded. It's okay, they are busy, they might be busy. I made my statement, so we are our relation with the city and the state is to the Secretariat.
Final question.
Thank you, Mr. President. As the General Assembly does meet today, and we have good news about ceasefire, which is very important but is it enough after losing too many lives in the Middle East, Palestine, and Is there any one-to-one steps to reach the any one-to-one step agenda to reach the two-state solution, or it's just we talk about two-state solution without real steps to work for it?
To answer first part of your question, is it enough after so many people died? I had a meeting with the ministers this noon, and the Palestinian foreign minister said, if the ceasefire starts, our children, our women, our people, civilian people, will sleep tonight without the fear of having been bombed or being killed. This is important. So many lives were lost, but with the ceasefire, at least the civilian Palestinians will feel comfortable until we see that the ceasefire is broken. So our problem will be, we will watch it, if the ceasefire is implemented or not. Then comes the other steps. First, a confidence building must be on the platform.
And it will not be just talking about the two-state solution, because we don't see real progress toward this to reach the two-state solution.
Well, this is not a problem which occurred yesterday or last year. It is with us since the creation of the United Nations almost. So no, it shouldn't last forever. Sometimes in politics, sometimes 10 years is too short, but 2 days is very long. So we must find the important moment, a window of opportunity, and we must be ready for that moment. If we're not ready, we miss it. If we are ready, we just capture it and go for another step. But the important thing is we shouldn't be in complacency, and we shouldn't say, okay, we did it, thank you very much. As the President of the General Assembly, I will be the follower of today's meeting. And if necessary, I mentioned again, if necessary, and if it is found useful, I will convene another meeting on Palestine to keep the pressure, if necessary, on the parties. And this will put pressure on the Security Council and on the Secretary General, the other two organs, through the General Assembly. That's how it works.
Thank you everyone for coming to Stakeout.
Thank you very much. Have a good day. We'll see you in